Before this video starts, I just want to give you a warning that this is going to be a longer video than usual. So you can pause the video right after this little message, go make yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, kick back, relax, and enjoy watching me talk about my addiction that constantly keeps me broke. I'll wait. What is up, film fam? It's your boy I of Alchemy coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be showing you part of my film camera collection. And I say part of because these are only the working cameras that I have with me now. I have a couple at my parents' house as well. I have a couple at the shop being CLA'd and repaired, and I have a couple in boxes waiting to get sent off to be CLA'd or repaired. Let's get into some cameras. I'm going to be starting with the oddballs, and then I'll break the rest of the cameras up into brands, and we'll move through it like that. Got it? Cool? Cool. So the first camera on the list is going to be this no-name panorama camera. And it's a fun little camera. It has a plastic lens, only one aperture, only one shutter speed, completely mechanical. You don't need batteries even. No light meter reading, no autofocus, nothing. It's just a 25mm lens, which is quite fun actually because it's so wide. You use some 400 or 800 speed film in here and you're off to the races. This thing doesn't even have a flash or anything like that. You literally just open the lens, wind on, and fire a shot. That is it. Very, very simple. This is fun for somebody just starting out, or if you want to be experimental with your photography. You're not going to get the best results from this lens, but I mean, for the aesthetic, this thing is pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, I have like 2 or 3 of these things. The first one I bought for like 30 Rand, which is, what is that? $2. And the others I was given. So yeah, that's a thing. The next camera up for weird cameras is going to be this Kodak KB10. It is essentially the same story, just a little bit nicer. So you have a frame counter, you have a viewfinder, and a simple lens. I think this is fixed focus as well. One aperture, one shutter speed. You open up, you fire a shot. I don't know what the focal length of this is. Usually they are 35 or 38mm. But at least you have a flash, so a little bit of extra features, but not too much. Anyway, I'm not going to waste too much time on this thing. This is fun for if you want to go to a party, or if you want to give it as a gift to somebody who's just starting out in film and doesn't know any settings. Yeah, Kodak KB10. Now, the next camera on my list is, yeah, it's weird, but it's also a beautiful camera. It's a post-World War II Simoca 35. This thing is tiny for what it is. It's beautiful, it's really well constructed, but my tripod socket is rattling a bit. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, really old design. As you can see, it's just a simple viewfinder camera. It has an extremely short focusing throw. This thing might be fantastic for street. If you just stand with it at your waist, you maybe throw it to infinity and you just throw off a shot. I like how this thing sounds as well. So you wind it on. Very, very nice. Simple, elegant, and yeah, it's a very minimalist camera. Now with those out of the way, let's get to the camera brands that you're probably more aware of and more familiar with. The first one I'm going to talk about is a camera brand that was hype before hype was a thing. A camera brand that did a collab with Leica back in the day. They made lenses and cameras for Leica as well. And that brand is no other than #Minolta gang. Now the first camera I'm going to speak about is a very underrated camera in my opinion, and I also think that this baby is better than the Minolta X700. I'll explain why. It is the Minolta X370. This thing is awesome. It's supposed to be an entry-level camera, but it has a couple of features that the X700 doesn't even have. If you look into the viewfinder and you look at the shutter speeds, if you're in manual mode, it will tell you what shutter speed you are on, but also what shutter speed the camera recommends. The X700 doesn't have that. Another feature that this camera has and the X700 doesn't is 60/40 split metering. The X700 has a 50/50 metering system, which means that you are going to get more accurate exposures with this. You could shoot slide film with this thing. So seeing that I was mentioning the X700 so much, you can of course guess that the next camera up on the list is gonna be the Minolta X700. This thing is classic, it's beautiful, like the design is really sexy. I like the thumb rest on the back of the camera. It's very, I don't know, it's modern in a vintage sense, if that makes sense. This is great for a beginner and an advanced shooter like so. It has full program mode, it has aperture priority mode, and it also has full manual mode. Minolta made some fantastic glass as well. Like I said, worked with Leica, bruh. What more do you want? So we spoke about the brand that worked with Leica back in the day. But let's talk about one of Leica's underdog opponents. The brand that kept Leica on its toes, and Leica actually took them to court because, well, to be honest, I think Leica was a bit threatened. They were making such good gear that Leica was losing money to them. And that brand is, of course, Olympus. OM Zuiko lenses are my first vintage love. My first lens system that I fell completely in love with because the colors are fantastic, the contrast is amazing, and the sharpness is magnifique. With all that being said, let's get into the first camera. And the first camera I'm going to talk about is an OG point and shoot. It is this little Olympus Trip 35. Now, as you can see, mine is pretty beat up, but it still gets the job done. This is a zone focusing camera. If you look on top of the lens, you will see that there are little icons, and you choose, well, you guesstimate how far your subject is. You select one of those logos, you wind on, and you fire off a shot. It's that simple. It only has two shutter speeds. I believe it's 1/40th of a second and 1/200th. It is all mechanical, and it uses a selenium cell light meter, so you don't even need batteries. I wish point and shoots today came out like that. Anyway, moving on. The next camera I'm going to be talking about is in the same spirit of the Trip 35, if you catch my drift, but it's going to give you double the value. Let me explain. This is the Olympus Pen EE. This is a half frame camera, meaning that on one 35mm frame you actually have two pictures in portrait orientation. So naturally, this thing's viewfinder is in portrait orientation. That means that you are going to get 72 shots per roll instead of your standard 36, which, if you're on a budget like I used to be, this thing is fantastic. But it's also fantastic to challenge yourself creatively. Now, this is the original Pen EE, so the ISO only goes up to 100, but later models did go up higher. And this thing's lens is extremely sharp. You might think that, well, because it's half a frame, you're going to lose the resolution. And while that is true, this lens can hold its own. This thing is the same like the Trip 35, selenium light meter, all mechanical, two shutter speeds. It's so tiny and it's so fun. I'm going to try to show you how it sounds because both of these cameras also have under and overexposure prevention. So if I have enough light here, maybe you can hear how it sounds. Let me wind it on, face it to the light, and nope, not enough light. Here we go. Okay. With that out of the way, let's move on to the next one. So we're still gonna go with that design. The Pen EE was awesome. I have the next iteration here, which is the Olympus Pen EE 2. This is obviously the version that came out afterwards. Only a couple slight improvements, but this now goes all the way up to 400 ISO for the meter reading. You could actually use something like Portrait 400 or whatever. So now I'm gonna try to wind on and show you what it sounds like. There we go. Anyway, moving on. Now, I know you guys like hype cameras, and this is of course very hype right now. The Olympus Mu 2. I want to talk about the Mu brand as a whole. I've owned about, what, 2-3 Olympus Mus. All the zooms I've owned as well, and all the Mu 2 zooms. And I think that most of them are pretty good, some of them aren't as good. If you're gonna find one of these, go for either this, the original Mu, or the original Mu zoom. I actually find the original Mu zoom more fun to use than this. That takes nothing away from this thing. It is a fantastic camera, it's sleek, it's beautifully designed. I mean, a 35mm f2.8 is nothing to scoff at on a point and shoot. Plus, this thing goes all the way up to 1/1000th of a second shutter speed. This is a fantastic camera to have whenever. This you can literally just throw in your pocket. I threw it in my pocket one day, forgot it was there. It's that small. Nice camera to use on the street, but what you need to keep in mind is, on the street, once you fire your shot, between pressing your finger on the shutter button and the camera actually firing, there's about a half a second delay. So you might miss that critical timing that you are used to judging for. Anyway, let's move on. Now I want to talk about the uncle of the Mewtwo. They share the same lens, but I feel like this is a better camera than the Mewtwo, and it's one of my favorite cameras ever. It is this, the Olympus XA. Now this is a rangefinder camera, meaning that there's no autofocus. You actually focus with a little tab, and there's a patch in the viewfinder. You line up the images, and then your subject is in focus. This is a aperture priority camera. It goes up to 1/500th of a second only. You can select your aperture, which I think is fantastic. You might think this is just a tiny little plastic camera like every other point and shoot, but this thing is so underrated, man. The fact that it's so small means that you can click it anywhere you want, and there is a detachable flash as well, and they come in different sizes and different strengths, so it's a little bit modular. The lens really shines. Some of the best pictures I've ever taken were taken with this camera. They came out in different iterations, but the first one is the only one that is a rangefinder camera. So if you find one of these, don't sleep on them. We've spoken about the brand that was my first vintage lens love. Now let's speak about the brand that sparked my love for analog SLRs. The brand that actually gave Carl Zeiss a run for its money. And at one point in time, it made the world's best 50mm SLR lens. And that brand is Pentax. I don't know what it is about Pentax. They just have some magic, be it radioactive. They have some magic that just vibes with me really hard. I love the design of the body, and I love the M42 mount. It's one of my favorite systems to use. I think even more so than the Zuiko lenses now. I'm gonna start with the newer cameras that I have and work my way back, because I think of my older cameras I have some really interesting stuff. Now first off, I'm going to talk about my point and shoots. I'm not going to speak about the ones that I don't have with me right now, so I'm just going to speak about these. I have the SPO 738S and the SPO 90MC, and the SPOs are extremely underrated. These two are mint boxed versions that haven't been used ever before, so I'm keen to put a roll through them and see what they do. But from previous experiences, I've used one of these before. I've never even seen one of these before. The results with this were great, so I'm keen to see what happens. Let me know if you guys want to see that video. So those were 90s point and shoots, but let's move back about 20 years or so. Let's go to K1000 land. I actually want to talk about this baby. This is the Pentax K1000 SE. And SE stands for Special Edition. Now what makes this special? Well, very little actually, but I mean, it's pretty rare to find a K1000 SE in good condition these days. So if you do find one, hold on to it. They're only going up in price. The K1000 is a very utilitarian camera. It's a hype camera right now, and I have no idea why. It's a fully manual camera. You have 1,000th of a second down to 1 second plus bulb. Of course, it's only manual. There's no aperture priority or shutter priority or whatever. And this beginners cut their teeth in this camera. Very, very classic. Anyway, I have 3 of these in front of me right now. This is the only SE I have. I don't see a reason why you shouldn't have one of these. I kind of do. I lied. Let me show you. This is the Pentax Spotmatic. This is one of my all-time favorite body designs. I think this thing is just absolutely beautiful. The viewfinder is nice and big, it's nice and bright, very simple. The lenses are astounding, man. Takumar lenses, that's all I can say. So the reason why I think the Spotmatics are better than the K1000 series is because of one thing, and that is this. That is how you switch the K1000 on and off with the lens cap. There's no on and off switch. With the Spotmatic, you press a little switch on the side of the lens, that activates the meter, and when you fire a shot, that switch pops back down. That is very handy, because that doesn't mean that if I leave my lens cap off, or if I lose it like I usually do, I'm not going to drain my battery. So M42 mount bodies and lenses are plentiful. They were made in the millions and millions. The individual lenses that came out in M42 mount were, I think, over 1,600. You can't go wrong with these. What was before the Pentax Spotmatic? Well, we have our pre-Spotmatic bodies. And the first one I want to talk about is my Pentax S3. This thing is fantastic, and what you are looking at on top is actually a light meter. These bodies came without a light meter. It was common in those days not to have a light meter in your camera. So how this works is you fold this flap up and you detach your light meter. This camera is very Spartan. It has everything that you need and nothing that you don't. Anyway, I'm rambling about this too long, but this shutter advance is butter. I can play with this thing all day. Yeah, let me just move on. Now, I'm about to talk about an extremely rare camera, a very special camera to me. This is a camera that came out before the S3 even. That is this. Have a look at it, take it in, read the nameplate, and do you see something different? Penta Asahi Flex. This camera is the rarest camera I own and probably will ever own. This camera was only released in South Africa in very, very limited quantities. I think there were less than 3,000 of this particular one made. Back in the day, I'm not going to talk about brand disputes, but another brand had the rights to the name Pentax, so in South Africa we had to name it something else. The Pentax cameras came out with names like Penta, changing the names up so that they can work around naming rights. The rarest one to have a different name was the Penta Asahi Flex. You got Penta Asahi, you got Penta Asahi, Penta Asahi Flex, but this is a Penta Asahi Flex. It's actually an S2, or if you are somewhere else in the world, it's an H2. It's a very, very simple camera. It's basically the same like the S3, it's just the S3 has that 1,000th of a second shutter speed. And I think that this thing is beautiful. It doesn't even really have a hot shoe. It has a detachable cold shoe. This is how the camera actually looks. And if you wanted to use a flash, you'd have to attach a cold shoe on it. I googled this thing just to see how much they go for. Now I'm not going to tell you, just Google it. I found one that sold at a museum auction. I could make some serious money with this thing. Let's talk about the brand that I always hated and I grew to love it so much that I shoot 90% of my work with this brand now. A brand that, well, I still hate the digital cameras, but the film cameras were so good and their lenses are undeniably incredible. And that brand is, of course, Nikon. Now, of course, if you know Nikon, you know their reputation for their quality and their precision in their optics. But let's talk about some of the cameras. So the next camera I'm going to talk about is this hefty little beast over here. Well, it's not little at all. The Nikon FTN. How do I explain this camera? Okay, you're at the store and you tell your mom, "Mom, I want a Nikon F." And your mom tells you, "We have a Nikon F at home." This is the Nikon F at home. I say that, but in all seriousness, this is a fantastic camera. Mine even still has a working light meter. Somebody gave this to me and I'm very, very appreciative of it. If you're watching this, thank you so much. On this, it also has a 50mm f1.4 and I was given this combo as is. I've made some pretty awesome pictures with this and I'm really amazed at the results. This thing is built to last. It's serious quality and, well, it's a brick shit house, but a camera. Now the next camera I'm going to be talking about is one of my favorite cameras, Nikon L35 AF. This thing is awesome. I love it. And I know I said that this is a grail camera in one of my videos, but I bought the camera on eBay and I forgot about it. And when it got here, I used it and I realized that I actually like that camera more. I'll show you guys that camera in a bit, but let's talk about this. A 35mm f2.8 lens, extremely sharp, even sharper, and it produces even more resolution than the Mu 2. This thing is still slept on if you're looking for a Contax T2, if you want that quality, and of course you don't have the money. Well, this thing is not far off in terms of quality. I'm not talking about the build, I'm not talking about how it looks or how it feels, I'm talking about what it produces. This thing is awesome. I'm also going to say that there are problems that plague this camera, like the flimsy battery door, but for what it is, I think that you are getting a lot. And this body, if you guys didn't know, it's plastic, yes, but it has a metal shell under here. So this thing is still going to be durable as well. Anyway, I'm talking about this camera too long. Let's move on. Next camera on the list is going to be my Nikon FE. This thing produces some amazing results and it has a feature on here that most other Nikon cameras don't have. This thing can mount both non-AI and AI lenses, meaning that I can use all my Nikon lenses on this thing. It is very, very accurate with this metering. It's fun to use. It's sleek. It's a beautiful design. You might hear people say that there's reliability issues and whatever, but I've come across a fair few of these and none of them were in non-working order. None of them even had metering problems. If you're looking for a good camera, you can't go wrong with this. So the next camera I'm going to speak about is the younger brother of the camera I just spoke about. The FE is the predecessor and this is the next gen, the Nikon FE2. Still a very, very beautiful design. I think it looks a little bit better than the FE, but the shutter speed goes all the way up to 1/4000th of a second. What I like on this thing is that there is a lock. You can't just open the back like on most cameras. You need to pull this tab up. There's a little lever that you need to move out of the way so that you can pull it all the way up. What I like about this camera is, I don't know if you can see this, but the shutter blades are honeycomb design. You also have aperture priority on the FE as well as this camera, so really versatile. This thing is going for a fair bit right now, but for a reason. This thing is really good. The next camera I'm going to be talking about is the OG Nikon camera. The camera that started it all for them in the SLR world, and that is the Nikon F. This thing is a workhorse. I've shot tons of weddings and portrait sessions with this thing. This thing just keeps on going. I have no qualms about this thing. I meet externally. If you want build quality, I don't think you're gonna find better than a Nikon F unless you put it next to a Nikon Mat. They're pretty much the same. Super modular, super reliable, and it's a really beautiful camera to look at. It's very heavy as well, so you might want to hit the gym when using this thing. The next camera I'm going to be talking about ties with the Nikon F for being my favorite Nikon SLR of all time. It is my second workhorse and I have actually been using this more than my Nikon F lately. My Nikon FM2, and this is actually a FM2N. This thing is ultra reliable. It's all mechanical. 1/4000th of a second. Wind it on, fire off a shot. Really good, buttery smooth. I have no problems with this thing, and in all black I think that this thing looks beautiful. Oh snap, I have a roll of Ultramax in there. Well, that's a shot wasted. That is my last Nikon camera. Let's move on to the other stuff. So these are also a few oddballs, but they are oddballs that I enjoy. And first up, this thing is extremely underrated. This is the Ricoh KR5. This is an all mechanical camera as well. Only goes up to 1/500th of a second. Metering is pretty good. I can't speak much about it because I don't use it too much, but I like the camera. Let's move on to something more interesting. So the next camera I'm going to be speaking about is a camera that is very unknown to most people. It is the Adox Golf 63S. And it's called 63 because the aperture, the max aperture is 6.3. This is a medium format camera and shoots 120 film. It's a really fun old school camera. There's no focusing aids. It's just a viewfinder camera. But this is something that you're going to be using for landscapes or if you want something compact to take around with you. A really fun camera, and I like it because not a lot of people know about it. Yeah, anyway, let's move on. Now the next camera on my list I picked up for a grand total of $40 or somewhere around about there. I don't know the exact conversion rate, but yeah, this guy hit me up. He was like, yo, I have this camera, do you want it? He sent me pictures. I was like, yep, I'm definitely taking that, even if it's just for parts. And that was this thing, my Rolleiflex. Now I know very little about Rolleiflex, but I know a bit about other Rollei cameras, and I know that most things Rollei makes is extremely good. So whatever lens was on here, I was going to use this thing anyway. Fantastic results. I'm gonna actually send this thing away to get CLA'd, but yeah, I mean, a Rollei for $40, could you really say no to that? It's a very beautiful design, very sleek, very compact. It's nice if you wanna throw this in your bag if you're going for a trip. So, a Rolleiflex. What model is it? I don't know. When was it released? I don't know. I can't tell you, but it's a Rolleiflex. Let's move on to my favorite medium format camera that I've ever used. Even more so than Mamiya RB67 or whatever else. This is my Yashica 635. I own the Yashica A, the Yashica D, all of those. Use the Yashica 124G. I don't know, I always just go back to this, and I think it's for the fact that I can use 35mm film in here as well. That's why it's called 635. There's just something special about it. Produces fantastic results. Yashinon lenses and Yashiko lenses have that swirl in it. It's medium contrast. It gives you that vintage look, and I really enjoy it. The Yashica D and the Yashica 635 is essentially the exact same camera, just the Yashica 635 can also shoot 35mm film. Anyway, let's move on to my final camera. This camera is going to be replacing my Nikon L35AF. This baby. My Yashica T2. I never thought I'd love this thing so much. I was on eBay, I was bidding, and it was the last 5 seconds I placed a bid. It said that I lost the bid, but a day later I got an email saying that I won the bid. And I didn't know until this thing showed up at my door a couple months later, and I was like, wait, what? I threw it all in this thing, and my word, man. The results this thing produces is just, it's undeniably good, and it's more fun than using the L35AF. I hate saying that, but it's true. For me, in any way, it's more fun than using the L35AF. And that was my grail, but this was the camera that I never knew I needed. This camera has a 35mm f3.5 Carl Zeiss lens. It is reliable, kind of looks like Darth Vader, which I also like. I love this 80s blocky aesthetic, and I'm gonna be holding on to this thing. This is most of my collection. Now, I firstly wanna say that I forgot that I hit 100 subscribers a little while ago, so I want to say thank you for that. And now I think I'm on 150, so thank you for that as well. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in to watch my videos. I just want to ask, if you want me to review any of these cameras on the table, please let me know and I'll do my best to accommodate you guys. So if you enjoyed the video, like the video, and until the next time I see you guys, peace.